Hi, I'm Peter Roper. Welcome to Potluck Politics. We're very fortunate today to have a guest, Kevin Lembo, the State Comptroller since 2010. Thank you for coming, Kevin.
I'm happy to be here, Peter.
Kevin has worked for years as a public health advocate in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Nearly 2 decades ago, he moved from New York to Connecticut. We're glad he came. And became Assistant Comptroller. In 2004, he was appointed the first state healthcare advocate, and then was elected Comptroller in 2010. And actually, we did an interview with you as you were running. You came to the Groton Democratic headquarters. We did a very pleasant interview in the back room, I think. At the
That's right.
So we put you over the top.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll always be grateful to Groton.
So you end up having a background in healthcare and finance and other issues, which I think is really useful. It seems like a perfect combination. Anything you want to add to that description of your background? There's a lot more to it, but anything you think is important?
I guess when I think about it, I think about 2 buckets, right? There's a head bucket and a heart bucket. Mm-hmm. And in the head bucket, I put all the education that's necessary to do this work and the experience to do the work. Mm-hmm. And in the heart bucket, is really the thing that motivates us to do the work, right? Are we trying to make things better? Are we trying to really make a positive difference? And also in that heart bucket is being willing to be an advocate. Because it's almost anybody could tally up numbers. But when you get those numbers and you have to say to a governor in a public space, I disagree with you, or to a legislature, I disagree with you, that's not for the faint of heart, as they say.
Yeah. It doesn't win you popularity contests, I'm sure.
Not always.
In some quarters.
Not always, but it's really the nature of the job. It's why we elect the constitutional officers independently. Because people are asking us to be independent and to do our own analysis.
Yeah. There are probably a lot of our viewers that don't even know what Comptroller is, so I'd like you to talk a little bit about that and talk about the state budget, because that's probably one of the main things that you're focused on, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Comptroller is one of 6 constitutional offices in Connecticut, and the obvious ones are the governor and lieutenant governor, but we also have the Secretary of State, the Treasurer, the Comptroller, and the Attorney General. Right. The Attorney General is number 6, I'm number 5, and it goes up from there. That's not our order of succession should something happen to the people above us. No, it's the order in which we appear in the Constitution. So when the people of Connecticut decided we need to have somebody to do this job and they entered us into the Constitution, that's our order. So my job, as it has evolved over time since the 1800s when we started having a comptroller, is to keep the state's books. I'm the fiscal guardian of the state, and what that means is I pay all the bills, I pay all the employees, I buy health care for about 200,000 people. I am in charge of paying out retirement benefits to our former employees, now retirees. And I run something called the core financial system, which is the blinking financial heart of the state, where all of these transactions happen. And frankly, if it stopped working one day, those transactions would stop. So I have to make sure that that heart is healthy and blinking and doing its job.
And you do have a staff?
I do have a staff. Whole agency, we're about 260 some odd folks. And I often refer to us as the people who live under the stairs. Like, we operate doing big work, important work every day, but people don't think much about us until something goes wrong. It's a great group of people. I'm very lucky to work with them, and we've done some really interesting and innovative things over the years, including working on the budget, which, as everyone who's watching knows, has been a challenge over not just the last 7, 8 years, but over the last 12, 16 years has been a difficult one.
And a lot of it's a result of the years before that.
Yeah, and that's part of the big problem, right? So part of the problem is there are, what do they say, the hens come home to roost? All those years of irresponsible decision making, putting off making contributions to the pension plan, for example, overspending when we had resources coming in, and never setting enough money away so you could weather the next rainy day without having to cut programs or raise taxes. A lot of that stuff never happened because it was this boom and bust cycle in Connecticut's economy. And even when we had downturns, Connecticut would always come roaring back, and everyone operated as if there had never been a downturn. And those days seem to be over, at least for now. And so putting restraint, putting limitations, forcing contributions to the rainy day fund, meeting our obligations, are not particularly popular always because folks would prefer to have resources to do other things.
Yeah. The flashy stuff.
Yeah, we always call it the shiny thing. And again, Connecticut's pretty notorious for getting distracted by the shiny thing.
I know you're not supposed to ask a question unless you know the answer, but I'm trying to get information from you.
Sure.
What is the difference between the treasurer and the comptroller?
Oh, it's an important question. So in simplest terms, it's a money in, money out question. The treasurer is money in. So if you wrote a check to the state of Connecticut, chances are you wrote it to treasurer, comma, state of Connecticut. The treasurer manages the cash pool. She takes in all of those resources, and she also manages the state retirement funds, so billions of dollars in investments. I, as the comptroller, am money out. So because I pay all those folks and I pay all those bills, I rely on having adequate cash to do that, and the treasurer makes sure that I have that. So, and we also serve as a check and balance on one another. So it all has to sync up at the end of the day, and the numbers have to jive.
And so you have a good relationship then with the treasurer, and
I do,
can
and our staff
that
works
work well?
together on a multiple times in a day, depending on the issue. But yes, I've had a very good working relationship with Treasurer Napier, Denise Napier, who has now announced she is not going to seek re-election. And so we'll see who emerges as the new treasurer. And
2 or 3 options on the Democratic side, I think, running, aren't they?
2, 3, I think we're up to 4 now on the Democratic side, and I can't remember how many on the Republican side. So we'll see what the will of the electorate is.
So you are running again for this job.
I am.
It seems like it's not an easy job and not a glamorous job, but I guess you like it enough to run again?
I do. I am a self-described, or probably more correctly, described by others as a data nerd. You know,
I heard that somewhere.
Yes. So I'm the guy who loves working with big data sets and really mining down on those to figure out what the policy options are, and then to get those to a point where they're ready to take the legislature and potentially put law into place that helps us achieve our goals as a people in this state. So when you sit on this many data sets, healthcare data, budget data, it's a pretty interesting place to be. I run a decidedly policy-heavy staff. They work very hard to make sure that they're doing really interesting work with the data that's available to them. So yeah, we've done some great things around government transparency and around correcting problems in the pension system and forcing the legislature to save for a rainy day the next time money comes flowing in. But we have more work to do around teachers' retirement, for example, and also in the area of healthcare. I think it may be past time for Connecticut to design its own public option for healthcare. And
Absolutely.
When you run a health plan as big as I do, which is the largest private health plan in the state, we can really leverage that as we've done to help municipalities already in the partnership plan to make options available for other people.
I'd like to hear how the budget looks right now and how the finances are at this point from your perspective.
Sure. So we've seen...
It's probably the best one to ask.
Yeah, I always try to measure our pronouncements about the budget against what the final numbers are to see, how close we were.
Yeah.
Folks have said that they rely on our numbers more often than not, and I think there's a reason for that.
The governor would have numbers, the legislature would have
exactly
numbers,
right.
You have numbers. So
that's right. And sometimes folks say, why do we have all these
numbers? Somebody outside
numbers?
may have numbers too.
They may as well. The interesting thing about the 3 primary reporters on the budget, the legislature, the governor's office, and me, is that both the governor and the legislature have a dog in the fight. Yes. It's their budget more often than not. So, it's hard to say we created this budget and it's not working. It's my job as an independent analyst to look at that and say, well-intended.
Your budget isn't working.
Excuse me, well-intended, but you didn't quite get there. Excuse me. So right now, I report out on the 1st of every month on where we are versus where they had budgeted. And we have seen a deficiency, meaning there's a shortfall in the budget. It was about $245 million last month. It's down to 190 something this month. So it's improving, but slowly.
Yeah.
There are adequate reserves at this point to cover that. but you really want to get that down to a level number.
Yeah. So it is getting better, and my sense for the economy in this area is good. I mean, EB is booming, I guess, and I'm always busy, but I have subs that I judge are pretty busy too. So it seems like things are moving, but it's just not a boom economy, and I don't want a boom economy, frankly.
Yeah, it's not a boom. If you look at how we've been improving, it really looks like the teeth of a saw. Sort of goes up and retreats and goes up and retreats. But if you trend that smooth over time, you'll see, improving in a positive direction. But it's a little hard to feel it sometimes. And so folks are not feeling the recovery happening, and that raises concern.
Do you want to comment on the legislature? Are they able to get things done? Are they any better than Congress? Because we see Congress more than we see our local legislature, nuts and bolts, I guess, in operation. And Congress is not pretty these days, but
I would say our legislature is infinitely better than Congress. I think we have some wonderful congressional representatives from Connecticut that we send to Washington, but writ large, the process there is very, very, very broken.
Yeah.
Folks do fight.
Compromise is a dirty word now, and that's what government's about, really, in my opinion, at least. And on the state level, it seems like there's still some compromise happening.
Yes, and they know they have to work together. And so I think I'm hopeful. They passed a budget last year. It's not what anybody really would have wanted, but it was a compromise budget, and they got it done. And now we'll see what they end up doing this year. It's early. Even though it's a short session, we'll see what they end up coming up with. I actually, as a general matter, have great faith in the legislature. They, when given good information and led to the right solution with good data, they will respond. I mean, when we ask them to tie their hands budgetarily and prepare for the next rainy day fund, the next rainy day by putting money away. We were asking them to tie their hands in the next good economic time. And that's a hard thing to ask appropriators to do. But to a member, Democrats and Republicans, frankly, and perhaps for different reasons, they all said yes, they wanted to do that and agreed to do it, not once now, but twice. So that makes me hopeful that, again, given the right information and the right leadership, that they can get it done.
I'm curious to know your take on the Trump Republican tax scam, as I call it. I think Nancy Pelosi started that. I really think it was a tax scam, and it recently passed. How is that going to affect Connecticut's budget? Do you have any sense of where we're going to go with that?
Sure. No, look, as you know, I'm a Democrat. That's the party that I associate and align myself with. But in my job, I try to operate in a nonpartisan way, because partisanship, I believe, is for elections, and governance is for trying to bring people together. That said, when I look at what happened in Washington with the tax plan, I see a real piling on onto states like Connecticut and New York and California and Massachusetts, where we, in some ways, have a different set of values, or at least our values manifest themselves differently. And we've made certain decisions as a state over the years that we want to support, poor kids to, get summer lunches, for example, that are not required, that we want to go above and beyond with people with disabilities or victims of domestic violence. These are our values. And that plays itself out in part in the tax code, because you have to have a way to fund it. But that's been, across both sides of the aisle, been the agreement. And now you're seeing an action in Washington that wants to penalize us for that. And that's not okay. And Connecticut is a donor state to the federal government. We give more to the feds than we get back. And we're in a position now where taker states that get way more back from the feds than they contribute are dictating the rules for the rest of us. So I have to, as you said earlier, the governor and I don't always, agree, but he put a proposal forward recently that would, create a mechanism for local property taxpayers to pay their contribution to the municipality through a 501c3 and be able to take that nonprofit sort of tax credit back for it if they're going to penalize us on how much we pay on state and local taxes. That's not to say that we don't always want to make sure that we're paying exactly as much as we need to, no more or no less, in taxes. But for someone else well outside the edges of the state of Connecticut to dictate what that's going to look like and how we're going to fund our programs seems like an overreach to me, at best.
Well, I think we could talk about this topic alone for another couple
Probably,
hours.
and unfortunately.
But we're going to move on to healthcare.
Sure.
It's a big part of what you do. You've already mentioned that. Just briefly talk about how you're involved, and I'm actually curious to know if the Affordable Care Act enters into this at all, and how it's working in Connecticut.
Sure. So as the Comptroller, I buy health care for state employees, retirees, and their families. That's about 200,000 people. And together with that plan, we have something called the Partnership Plan, which allows municipalities to come into coalition with us to buy health care. That's another 30,000 lives. So I buy healthcare for 230,000 people, give or take. And it's been very interesting because healthcare is sort of what I'm trained to do. It's my background. I've worked in it most of my adult life. I brought...
And thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I brought that experience to this office. So we're doing innovative things with the employee retiree health plan now that have never been done before. Trying to make sure that our members get their screenings, and for our chronically ill population, prevention, taking all stumbling blocks out of the way, and in doing so, have not only improved the health of the individual members, but drove down costs in the process. So, and that's not just me saying that. There is empirical evidence to support that. So much so that the private...
You wouldn't say it without numbers. You're a geek.
Right, yeah. I always like evidence. But that the private insurance companies are actually looking at our model and replicating it in other places in their book of business. So clearly we got something right. And one of the reasons we got it right is that we were able to bring management and labor and healthcare experts together to design something that would work. And so that's working. So that's sort of my primary job around healthcare. Then I explore ways to leverage that to make a difference in the lives of others. So right now we don't have a public option. I can't allow just anyone to come into the plan. But with the right waivers from the federal government and the right planning, we could do that and set premiums appropriately and have no profit motive involved in that.
And create a bigger pool, which usually is better.
Usually it's better. I mean, there's a limitation to the power of big numbers, but we're nowhere near. And when you look at what the state purchases now in healthcare, so if let's be generous, I'm at 250,000 roughly people. Medicaid's at 800,000, so that's more than 1 million people in public programs right now. Doesn't even take into account the other Medicare population in the state. We could really leverage, negotiate, and deliver great programs if we were able to take that next step. The Affordable Care Act, I think, was a blessed relief for people who were really waiting and suffering. Either they had a pre-existing condition and they were being forced to pay more than they should. And so there was that immediate relief that occurred. Now, over time, there's been some adverse selection in that pool, meaning folks who stayed in tended to be older and sicker, and the younger, healthier ones who weren't necessarily afraid of the fine for not getting health coverage still stayed away. We need to figure out a way to pull them in. And now, again, back to Washington, they seem very focused on unraveling the Affordable Care Act without any reasonable replacement solution. It's really just to undo something.
I just can't believe that the Republican Party has taken on, we're going to take away your health care as a policy that they're really pushing.
Yeah, and I think
they've been successful at that.
Right. I think right-minded Republicans understand that you need to offer an option, and that the cost to society, the cost to the healthcare system, the cost of premiums for the rest of us is much, much higher if people don't get coverage.
For everything.
Right, and so we wait till people get to an emergent situation and show up in the hospital and then pay 10 times more than they would if they had just gone to a walk-in clinic or their primary care provider to get something fixed. It doesn't seem smart to me at all. So now, but the rates in the Affordable Care Act are continuing to rise, and there are fewer and fewer options. So Connecticut's going to be faced probably next year with a question about what do we do here? I think if we can create a public option, put it into the exchange, have it compete there, sell it in the exchange and out, that could give some relief. There may be some other things we can do around benefit design, but it can't just be a simple pushing of higher deductible plans onto people, because we know it puts people in a situation of not getting the care they need when they need it. And this idea that if you just give people, quote, skin in the game, they're going to be better healthcare consumers when big business, big medicine, big pharma have all failed in trying to rationally think about what are the inputs into healthcare and how do we best manage those to make sure people get the care they need.
And my understanding is that Obamacare in Connecticut, or Affordable Care Act, actually did pretty well this year. A lot of people did sign up, even though they were predicting maybe it would drop off quite a bit. I think it may have dropped a little bit, but it was
I think that's right. I think there are about 100,000 people who are actually in the plan right now. So, you know, if it's working for them, that's great. But like everything else in healthcare, there used to be something called the high-risk pool, and it's where everybody got their insurance if they had a medical condition that nobody would cover. And the only people who went into the high-risk pool were people whose healthcare costs outpaced the very high premium they had to pay, because they were still net above. You don't want that situation, because then you've just repeated a failed policy of the past.
I guess you've talked a little bit about it, but other ideas you might have about saving money in healthcare? Because everybody wants to know how to save money in healthcare.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what we do every day. So one of the things I did a couple of years ago was we modeled what it would save to move our retirees over to something that was called Silver Scripts at that point, but it was sort of the Medicare pharmacy benefit. And what had happened for many, many years is our retirees never went near their Medicare pharma benefit because it was just covered under the state plan. But Medicare is supposed to be the first payer. So we figured that if we did this and forced Medicare to be the first payer, we could save the state a lot of money. So we saved $80 million a year by doing that. And this past year, and not everyone's happy about it, but in light of more budget concerns, we moved our retiree population over to a Medicare Advantage plan, but it's not like a Medicare Advantage plan that you would buy at the corner broker store. It's designed on our plan. They're getting all the coverage that they got before, but we're saving $130 million a year, again, by forcing the federal government to pay their first and fair share. So there's that, and then we need to look more at centers of excellence. We need to look more at where can I get my hip done, you know, effectively, cost effectively.
Even just transparency on what things cost would be helpful. A lot of doctors don't even know what their fees are.
They really don't.
At least they say they don't.
And now something we're working on this year, we actually had a hearing this day that we're taping this show on pharmacy benefit. You know, pharmacy costs have gone through the roof. And we have a bill that would bring greater transparency there and force disclosure of some of the hidden financial arrangements that exist between big pharma and the pharmacy benefit managers and the pharmacies themselves, to make sure that it's not always the patient or the big plan sponsor that gets the short end of the stick in that whole transaction. There's a lot of money changing hands there, a lot of wealth that's being transferred, but all it's meant for consumers is rising prices at the counter. So at a minimum, we need transparency, and one of the elements of the bill introduced today was they're going to force at the counter any rebates, any savings, any discounts that were available to your insurer to be available to you, even if you're in a high deductible plan or in a donut hole. Or so it's a big game-changing piece of legislation, and I'm proud to say it originated in my office, and we'll see if we can get it over the finish line.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good. One quick question. I know one of our former legislators was promoting a plan for UConn students that would basically force them to take private insurance instead of I think, Medicare that's available. And our current legislator sounds like she's also pushing that idea. Are you familiar with that, or you have any idea what that might mean?
So I'm roughly familiar with it. It seems to have raised its ugly head in this part of the world a couple of years ago. I think it's something we need to be really careful of. So my understanding is that it would force those students into a specific plan that someone else picked for them. And my advice is always to follow the money when it comes to things like this. Whenever you get a controlled group of people like that who have no choice about what they're, no options and no choices, somebody's making some money, and often a lot of money. I'm also concerned because over the years there have been certain insurance companies and brokers in particular who have, through universities in Connecticut and nationwide, sold what I'll call garbage insurance at a very high rate that only covered you if you fell and broke an arm, but really didn't cover you if you got the
but
flu.
not useful.
Right. So yes, do our college students need coverage that covers a broken arm? Sure. But do they also need something that gets them, care if they're ill, and a checkup, and reproductive health services, and all the things that we know that people need? It's got to be. There is a way to do that. So the UConn grad students, for example, have negotiated with UConn, and they're part of our partnership plan. They have a very select designed plan that's just for them. And they know that I negotiate that, and there's nobody making a ton of money on their backs.
Good. One healthcare issue, the last thing in this topic, mental health issues because of the late shootings we've been having, and that gets bandied about as the real problem, not guns. But there are a lot of problems involved with this violence.
Absolutely.
Do you know what's happening in Connecticut as far as healthcare and availability, and as a preventative to specifically gun violence?
Yes. So so more conversation certainly at the Capitol again about healthcare. But we had it with Adam Lanza in Newtown. It always comes up. But then folks sort of seem to lose a little bit of interest on this point. And it's probably one of the most important things, in addition to the gun regulations that they did pass, that we could do to make a difference. And everyone would love to say, to make sure that that never happens again. That is the goal. But some of that's out of our control. But there are things that are in our control. So if someone needs mental health supports, they need to be able to get it when it's identified that they need it, and there can't be waiting, whether that's addiction issues or actual mental health. There was defunding of some programs in the last couple of budgets that were there to specifically support people with mental illness. And that's so short-sighted. And the hubris of those who thumped their chest after Newtown and said never again, who went in and approved those cuts. Not okay, as an understatement. So we're doing a lot of work in our plan to make sure that our folks have access to care, but it's hard. Try finding a child psychiatrist in your health plan right now, whether you have great insurance or lousy insurance. It's a very hard thing to do. We need to think about this in better ways, and with any luck, we'll be able to develop a model that'll be replicable in other parts of Connecticut if we get this right.
I think we're running out of time here fairly quickly.
Okay.
I was going to ask you about your considering running for governor, but we could skip that. I guess I've heard that you and your spouse have consciously picked Connecticut a number of years ago now, but you didn't just end up here because you were born here. So, but
no accident of birth.
I want to give you a chance to give a shout out for Connecticut and maybe why you came and why you think it's a good place to be.
No, look, well, it's a great place to be, and every day that I wake up, I choose to be here. Like so many of us, you can tally easily all of the benefits of this great place, whether it's our natural resources, our location between Boston and New York, the shoreline, the mountains, our forested acres per capita. I mean, we have so much going for us, and that together with the pillars of our industry, when you think about finance and manufacturing and defense, we have so many big and powerful pieces of our economy that are underappreciated. And there's something that I never completely understood because I wasn't born here, but there seems to be a little bit of this down on ourselves thing. Like almost always, even when things are going well, I think it's absolutely critical to identify what the challenges are and work to fix those, but never abandon or make believe that we don't have significant strengths. This is a great place to live and to raise our families. And I'm convinced that, particularly with young people, if we make opportunity available to them, they will come and they will stay, because once they fall in love and decide they're going to have a family, there's no place better. Excuse me.
Kevin, thank you very much.
Great to see you.
Kevin Lembo, Comptroller, running in for Comptroller. Good luck on your race. And thanks for coming down and talking to us.
My
Appreciate it a
pleasure,
lot.
Peter. Thank you.
I'm Peter Roper. Thank you, viewers. See you at the next Potluck. Be well.